What would you do if you picked up your phone, 7 months pregnant, back aching, feet swollen, exhausted from a double shift, and found a divorce email sitting in your inbox? Not a conversation, not a phone call, not even a text, an email, with a subject line that said, "Moving forward." That is exactly what happened to me, and I want you to stay with me through every single word of this story, because what happened next is something nobody saw coming. Not him, not his family, not the woman he left me for. Nobody. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because stories like this one, we tell them every single week. And drop your city or town in the comments below. I want to know where all of you are watching from tonight. Let's get into it. My name is Celine Marbury, and before I tell you what he did, let me tell you who I was, because you need to understand just how much I had already survived before that email ever landed in my inbox. I grew up in Beaumont, Texas, not the rich part, not the side of town with the manicured lawns and the swimming pools. I grew up in a small, pale yellow house on Decker Street, where the window AC unit rattled like it was arguing with itself every summer night, and where my mother, Claudette Marbury, worked 2 jobs to make sure my little sister Petra and I never went to school hungry. My daddy left when I was 9, not dramatically. He didn't yell or slam doors. He just stopped coming home one Tuesday, and by Friday his closet was half empty, and my mother was sitting at the kitchen table holding a cup of coffee she never drank, staring at nothing. I learned early that love could disappear quietly, but I also learned something else. You keep going. Mama kept going. She worked her fingers raw at a dry cleaning shop during the day and waitressed at a diner on Route 90 3 nights a week. She put Petra and me through school. She taught me that a woman's dignity was not something a man could take unless you let him. I carried that lesson everywhere. I was sharp in school, always the girl with her hand up, always reading ahead, always hungry for something bigger than Beaumont. I got a partial scholarship to study business administration at the University of Houston, worked the rest of my way through with a part-time job at a shipping logistics company called Trident Supply Co., where I started as a weekend filing clerk making $12 an hour. By the time I graduated, I was a junior operations coordinator making $38,000 a year. By 26, I was making $52,000. By 28, I had been promoted to regional logistics manager overseeing 5 distribution hubs across the Gulf Coast. I was building something, brick by brick, with my own 2 hands. And then I met Dorian Voss. Dorian came into my life like a summer storm, fast, warm, and disorienting. We met at a professional networking event in downtown Houston. He was 32, tall, with sandy brown hair, and one of those easy smiles that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He worked in commercial real estate, drove a silver Audi, wore nice watches, and said things like, "I just admire a woman who knows her own worth," within the first 10 minutes of conversation. I should have clocked that as a performance. I didn't. We dated for 14 months before he proposed. He got down on one knee at Galveston Beach at sunset, and I said yes before he could even finish the sentence. I called Mama from the parking lot afterward, and she laughed and cried at the same time, and Petra screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I thought I had finally done it. I thought I had built something real. We got married on a Saturday in October. Small ceremony, beautiful. My mother wore blue. Petra was my maid of honor and cried through the entire vow reading. Dorian's mother, a stiff woman named Rosaline Voss, sat in the front row with an expression that suggested she'd just bitten into something slightly unpleasant. I smiled and passed the bread rolls. Dorian and I moved into a house in Katy, a real house, not an apartment, with a backyard and a garage and a room we immediately started calling the future. The future. We'd walk past that empty room and smile at each other. For a while, everything was good. But here's the thing about a while. It always ends. About 18 months into our marriage, things started shifting. Not all at once, slowly, the way a house settles. You don't notice the cracks until one day you do, and then you wonder how you ever missed them. Dorian started working late, a lot. Commercial real estate, he said. Deals don't wait for dinner. I understood. I was a career woman myself. I never crowded him. He started going to the gym at strange hours, 6 in the morning on Saturdays. He bought new cologne without mentioning it. He got quieter at dinner but louder on his phone in the backyard. I noticed, of course I noticed, but I also had things going on. I had just been given the opportunity of my lifetime, a chance to co-develop a proprietary logistics software with Trident Supply Co., a system that would automate routing and inventory management across the Gulf Coast supply chains. If it worked, the company wanted to license it regionally, maybe nationally. This was my project, my idea. My years of watching inefficiencies pile up in spreadsheets, knowing there was a smarter way. I was in it deep. 12-hour days, weekend calls. I was pouring everything I had into this software. And I was also, quietly, 4 months pregnant. We had been trying for over a year. When I finally saw those 2 pink lines on a Thursday morning in February, I sat on the edge of the bathtub and just breathed. I was so happy I couldn't even cry properly. It kept coming out as this strange half-laugh, half-sob. I told Dorian that evening, made his favorite dinner, grilled salmon with lemon butter and roasted asparagus, put a little onesie on the table in a gift bag. He opened it, looked at it, and he smiled. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. I told myself I was imagining it. I was not imagining it. At 5 months pregnant, I found a text message. I wasn't snooping, I want to be clear about that. His phone buzzed on the nightstand while he was in the shower, and I glanced over reflexively, the way you do, and I saw the preview. Last night was everything. I miss you already, Britta. I sat very still for a very long time. Britta Leland was 26 years old. I would later learn she worked at a property management firm that Dorian had done business with. She had long auburn hair and did hot yoga and posted motivational quotes on Instagram. She was perfectly nice looking, in the way that makes you feel like you're not allowed to be angry at her appearance specifically, just at the situation. I confronted Dorian that night. He denied it. He said Britta was a colleague. He said the text was taken out of context. He got genuinely angry at me for looking, even though I hadn't been looking, and somehow, by the end of the argument, I was the one apologizing. I think about that night a lot, how I apologized, how badly I wanted to believe him, because I was 7 months pregnant and exhausted, and I just wanted everything to be okay. It was not okay. It was a Tuesday in April. I remember it specifically because it was the day our software system, which we had named FreightPath, had just passed its first full internal audit without a single critical error. My project lead, a sharp woman named Dr. Imani Osei, had sent me a voice note at 7 in the morning that just said, "Celine, we did it. Call me." I was sitting in my car in the Trident parking lot, one hand on my stomach, grinning like an idiot. I opened my email to forward the audit report to my VP, and there it was. From Dorian Voss, subject, moving forward. I stared at the subject line for a moment like I didn't understand English. I opened it. It was 4 paragraphs long. 4. The first one said that he had done a lot of thinking. The second one said that he didn't believe we were compatible long-term and that it would be better for both of us to part ways now rather than later. The third paragraph, and I want you to feel the weight of this, the third paragraph said that he had already consulted with a divorce attorney and that he had prepared preliminary paperwork that he would have delivered to my workplace that afternoon. The fourth paragraph said, "I wish you well, Celine. I genuinely do." That was it. No phone call, no conversation, an email. I was 7 months pregnant with his child, and he sent me an email. I sat in that car for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe correctly. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my phone twice. The baby kicked, actually kicked, and I put my hand on my stomach and I just said out loud, to no one, to myself, to God, to the universe, "Okay, okay, okay," 3 times. Like I was resetting, like I was reminding myself that I was still here. I called my sister Petra. She picked up on the second ring and said, "Hey, what's up?" in her normal, cheerful voice, and I just started crying. Not delicate crying. Ugly, chest-heaving, can't-breathe crying. And Petra, God bless her, didn't say a single word. She just stayed on the phone. She just stayed. When I could speak, I told her. She was silent for 3 full seconds. Then she said, very quietly, "Where is he right now?" I didn't know. "Okay," she said. "Here's what you're going to do. You're going to go inside, you're going to do your job, and tonight you're going to come to my apartment and we're going to figure this out together. Don't do anything else right now. Just go inside and do your job." She knew me well enough to know that work was the thing that would hold me together. She was right. I went inside. I did my job. That evening, I drove to Petra's apartment in Midtown, Houston, with a bag of maternity clothes and my laptop. I sat on her couch while she made chamomile tea, and I read the email again, 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, because I needed to make sure I wasn't missing something, some softness, some explanation that would make sense. There wasn't one. Over the next few days, the full picture came together in pieces. Dorian had been seeing Brittle Leland for nearly 8 months. He had, apparently, already told his friends about her. Some of them had met her. He had mentioned to at least one colleague that he was planning to leave the marriage before the baby arrived because, and this is the part that made my hands ball into fists, because he didn't want to be trapped. Trapped? I was 7 months pregnant with a child we had planned and tried for, and he didn't want to be trapped. His mother, Rosalind, I later found out, had actually encouraged it. She had never thought I was right for her son. She thought I was too independent, too focused on my career, not attentive enough to Dorian's needs. I imagine she welcomed Britta with open arms. I signed the preliminary divorce papers 2 weeks later. I didn't fight them, I didn't have the energy, and honestly, I didn't want to keep a man who'd send me an email. What I did instead was go very quiet. And I went to work. Here is the thing about rock bottom. It has very good acoustics. When everything else falls away, when the noise of a relationship and its expectations and its performance all goes silent, you can hear yourself think with terrifying clarity. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Sugar Land, close enough to Trident's main office that I could walk on good days. My mother drove up from Beaumont the week I moved in and spent 10 days helping me set up the nursery. She didn't say much. She just painted walls and assembled furniture and made sure the kitchen was stocked. She cooked big batches of food and put them in the freezer with little handwritten labels. One night, I found her sitting in the rocking chair in the nursery, just sitting there in the quiet, and I stood in the doorway, and she looked at me and said, "You came from me, baby, and I am unbreakable. So are you." I didn't sleep well that night, but I worked. I worked like I had something to prove, because I did. Freight Path was my everything now. I poured 12-hour days into it. Dr. Imani Osei, my project's lead, noticed the shift in my intensity and never once asked me why. She just matched it. She was 51 years old, Nigerian-American, had a doctorate in systems engineering, and had the energy of someone 20 years younger. She became, in that season, one of the most important people in my life. "You're not building a product," she told me one evening when we were both still in the office at 9 p.m., surrounded by takeout containers and code printouts. "You're building your freedom. Make sure the foundation is solid." I heard her. Our son was born on a warm Thursday in June. I named him Miles Aurelius Marbury. I gave him my last name. Dorian had made it clear he wanted limited involvement. He'd said he would contribute financially as required by law, but was starting a new chapter. He signed the birth acknowledgement because his attorney made him, and he sent a gift, a stuffed elephant in a white box with no card, that I put on a shelf in the closet and did not look at again. Miles was 7 pounds, 4 ounces, and had my mother's nose and the most enormous dark eyes I had ever seen on a newborn human. He looked at me with this ancient, knowing expression, and I held him, and I thought, everything I do from here is for him. I took 6 weeks of maternity leave. Then I went back to work. Here is where I need to tell you about the other thing I had been quietly building. For years, long before Dorian, long before FreightPath, I had been investing. Nothing glamorous, I'm not talking about Wall Street. I started small. Index funds, REITs. I had an account with a small brokerage I'd opened at 24 with $800. Over the years, I contributed steadily, automatically, the way you pay rent, non-negotiably, every month. A financial advisor I'd met at a conference, a meticulous older man named Wallace Briggs, had helped me diversify into some commercial real estate holdings in the Houston metro area around the time I turned 27. He said, "You understand logistics. Commercial real estate is just logistics with buildings. You'll be good at this." He was right. By the time my marriage fell apart, I had a quiet, unsexy, deeply solid investment portfolio worth approximately $1.2 million. Dorian didn't know about most of it. Not because I hid it from him specifically, it just never came up. We had separate accounts, separate financial lives, mostly, and he never showed much interest in my finances beyond what I contributed to our household expenses. He assumed, I think, that I was a salary woman. Good job, steady income, nothing extraordinary. He assumed wrong. And here is where FreightPath changes everything. 14 months after Miles was born, Trident Supply Company finalized a regional licensing deal for FreightPath. A Houston-based logistics conglomerate called Harrow Beck's Partners acquired a regional license for $4.8 million. Trident kept the majority, but as the lead developer and the employee who had originally architected the system, thanks to contractual language that Imani quietly advised me to negotiate into my employment agreement 2 years ago, I was entitled to a development royalty. My royalty from that deal, $610,000. After taxes, approximately $440,000. 3 months later, Harrow Beck's exercised an option to expand the license nationally. That triggered a second royalty clause, another $380,000 after taxes. Simultaneously, Wallace Briggs called me one morning while I was feeding Miles scrambled eggs in his high chair. "Celine," he said, "the commercial property on Westheimer that we invested in 4 years ago, the developer wants to buy out our stake. They're offering $1.7 million for our share." I put down the spoon. "How much was our original investment?" I asked, even though I knew. $240,000, he said. I looked at Miles. He had egg on his chin and was deeply unconcerned with any of this. "Take the offer," I said. By the time Miles was 16 months old, my net worth, between the royalties, the portfolio, the real estate buyout, and my salary, had crossed $3.1 million. I was 31 years old. I drove a 4-year-old Honda CR-V and wore the same brands I'd always worn. Nobody knew. Now, I need to tell you about Dorian during this time. Because while I was building quietly in the dark, he was living loudly in the light. He and Britta Leyland had moved in together within 3 months of our divorce being finalized. They were, by all social media accounts, thriving. Vacations to Cancun, brunch photos, Britta posting things like, "Finally found my person," with pictures of Dorian grinning in a linen shirt on a beach somewhere. His mother, Rosaline, reportedly adored Britta, threw them a dinner party, called her exactly what Dorian needed. Some of our mutual acquaintances, people I'd considered friends, drifted toward his orbit. The couple, the fun new relationship, is always more magnetic than the single pregnant woman building spreadsheets in a home office. I was not invited to things I used to be invited to. I noticed. I didn't chase. Dorian's child support payments came on time. His attorney made sure of that, at least. But beyond that, he was largely absent from Miles's life. He saw him perhaps twice in the first year, once at Christmas, once at Miles's birthday, where he arrived 40 minutes late and left after an hour, checking his phone the whole time. Miles was too young to understand, but I understood, and I stored it. Not with anger. I had moved through anger already in the dark months right after the email, when I cried in the shower and wrote things in a journal that I later tore out and threw away. I had processed it. I had metabolized it. What I stored was clarity. This is who he is. This is what he chose. And that means this is not my loss. I had lunch with Imani every Thursday at a Thai place near the office. She was my anchor. She had been through her own version of this, a first marriage that collapsed in her early 30s, a rebuilding, a second chapter that she described as the version of my life that actually fits. People like Dorian, she said once over Pad CU, they're not villains in a movie. They're just small. Small people can only hold so much. They drop what they can't carry. I thought about that for a long time. I also started going to therapy. A woman named Dr. Cressida Fong, who had an office in River Oaks with a very comfortable gray couch and a way of asking questions that made you feel like the answer had always been there. You just hadn't looked at it straight. She helped me understand that I wasn't angry at Dorian for leaving. Not really. I was angry at the method, the email, the cowardice of it, the way it said, "You do not deserve even the discomfort of my presence when I hurt you." That's what the email said underneath the words. "And what do you want him to know?" Dr. Fong asked me once. I thought about it. "I want him to know that he misread me completely," I said. "He looked at me and saw something breakable, and I want him to see that he was wrong." She nodded. "That's not revenge, that's truth-telling. There's a difference." I filed that away too. Miles was almost 2 years old when the story took a turn that I genuinely could not have scripted. Trident Supply Co. was acquired. A national logistics and technology group called Meridian Freight Holdings, based out of Atlanta, operating in 23 states, purchased Trident outright for $47 million. It was the biggest deal in Trident's 30-year history. As part of the acquisition, Meridian wanted to roll FreightPath into their national infrastructure immediately, and they also wanted, specifically and contractually, the team that built it. The CEO of Meridian, a brisk woman named Constance Aquare, flew to Houston personally to meet with me. We sat in a conference room on the 14th floor of Trident's office tower, just the two of us and her general counsel. She slid a folder across the table. "We want to name you VP of Technology Integration for the Gulf and Southwest region. Base salary $240,000, equity package, full benefits. And we want to license FreightPath permanently. That includes a final royalty payment to you personally." I opened the folder. The royalty figure was $1.9 million. I kept my face very still. "Give me a week," I said. I called Wallace that evening, then Petra, then Imani, who had also received a significant offer and was absolutely taking it. 1 week later, I signed. My net worth at 32 years old crossed $5 million. I drove home that evening and picked Miles up through daycare. He ran at me across the parking lot. He was at the age where everything was a sprint, and I caught him and held him and spun him around, and he laughed that enormous 2-year-old laugh that sounds like pure physics, like joy converted directly into sound. "You have no idea," I whispered into his curly hair. He grabbed my face with both chubby hands and said, "Mama, snack." "Yes, baby," I said, "snack." Now, are you ready? Because this is where the story becomes something else entirely. Dorian worked in commercial real estate. Meridian Freight Holdings, as part of their Gulf Coast expansion, needed to lease a significant amount of commercial warehouse and distribution space across the Houston metro area, approximately 340,000 square feet across multiple facilities. They contracted a commercial real estate firm to manage the procurement. That firm was called Voss Leyland Property Solutions. Yes, Voss Leyland. Dorian had gone into business with Britta. They had launched a commercial real estate consulting firm together, apparently 18 months earlier. It was actually fairly well regarded. They had a few decent clients, solid reviews, and had positioned themselves in the industrial and logistics space specifically because Dorian knew that sector from his previous work. He had built something too, in his own way. The irony was not lost on me. The procurement process was handled through a blind bidding system. Firms submitted proposals, Constance's team evaluated them on merit, and the finalist was selected before any personal meetings happened. Voss Leyland Properties won the bid. I only found out the name of the firm the morning I was scheduled to attend the initial partnership meeting. Constance's assistant sent me the briefing documents at 8 a.m. I sat in my home office, Miles's breakfast dishes still on the counter, and I read the firm's name. And I laughed. Not a mean laugh, not a triumphant laugh. I laughed because it was absurd, because the universe, apparently, has absolutely no chill whatsoever. I called Petra. "You are not going to believe this," I said. She didn't believe it. Then she said, "What are you going to do?" I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. "My job," I said. "I'm going to do my job." The meeting was held in Meridian's temporary Houston office, a sleek, glass-walled space on Post Oak Boulevard that smelled like new carpet and ambition. I arrived at 9:45 for a 10 o'clock meeting. I wore a charcoal blazer over a cream blouse, my hair pulled back, small gold earrings. I had Miles's daycare artwork on my office wall at home, and a $5 million net worth, and a VP title at a $47 million company, and I felt, walking into that building, completely at peace with myself in a way I had never felt before. I was shown to the conference room. At 10 o'clock exactly, the door opened. Dorian walked in first. He was the same sandy hair, slightly longer now, same easy posture. He was wearing a good suit, carrying a portfolio. He was already talking to someone behind him, mid-sentence, professional smile fully deployed. Then he looked up and saw me. I watched it happen in real time. I watched his brain stutter. I watched his eyes do a rapid, involuntary calculation, trying to reconcile Celine, his ex-wife, with this conference room, this company, this table. He stopped. The person behind him, Britta Leyland, walked into his back slightly before she caught herself. She looked at me. I looked at her. Then I looked back at Dorian. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, the way you say it to anyone. "I'm Celine Marbury, VP of Technology Integration for Meridian Freet Holdings. I'll be your primary point of contact for this partnership. Why don't we all take a seat?" Nobody moved for 2 full seconds. Then Constance O'Quarry walked in behind them with her general counsel and 2 analysts, and the momentum of her presence carried everyone to their seats like a tide. Dorian sat down across from me. He looked like a man who had just stepped on a stair that wasn't there. The meeting was 90 minutes long. I ran it. I had prepared thoroughly. I knew the sites, the lease structures, the infrastructure requirements, the timeline. I asked precise questions. I gave clear directives. I made 2 decisions on the spot that Constance later told me she'd have made the same way. The Meridian team was engaged, professional, focused. Dorian was professional too, to his credit. He recovered, not instantly, but within about 15 minutes, he'd collected himself and was presenting his firm's proposal coherently. Britta was sharp, actually. She knew her numbers. Under different circumstances, I might have respected the partnership they'd built. But there were moments when I'd ask a follow-up question and Dorian would look at me with this expression I can only describe as bewildered reckoning, like he was watching something he thought was a story turn into a real thing in his hands. At one point, Constance mentioned the freight path system and my role in developing it, and she said, "Celine has been central to this company's value proposition since the beginning. She's the reason we're in Houston at all." I didn't look at Dorian when she said it. I didn't need to. After the formal meeting ended and the Meridian team stepped out for a break, Dorian and I were left at the conference table for approximately 45 seconds while Britta spoke to one of the analysts near the door. He looked at me. "Celine," he said, and his voice was quiet and careful, like he was stepping onto ice and testing its weight. "I didn't know you were at Meridian." "I know," I said. Your VP?" "Yes." A pause. "How is the baby?" "His name is Miles," I said. "He's 2. He's extraordinary." Something moved across his face. something complicated and private that I didn't try to name. "That's good," he said. "I'm glad." I nodded once. Constance came back in. The moment closed like a door. I drove to Mama's house that evening. She had moved to Houston the previous year. I'd helped her buy a small, pretty house in Pearland, close enough that I could drop Miles off on short notice and she could spoil him with the fierce, joyful dedication of a grandmother who had earned the right. She was at the kitchen table when I arrived, Miles already asleep in the back room after an early dinner. She had made sweet potato pie. I sat down across from her. I told her everything about the meeting. She listened without interrupting, which is rare for my mother and means she's really listening. When I finished, she cut me a slice of pie and slid it across and said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it. "Small," I said. Then, "No, that's wrong, not small. I feel like I thought seeing him would feel like something bigger, like a bell would ring or the sky would crack open or I would finally feel like I'd won something, but I just felt clear, like I could see exactly what everything was." Mama nodded slowly. "That's what healing feels like, baby," she said. "People think healing looks like a triumph. It doesn't. It looks like a Tuesday morning where you're just fine." I ate my sweet potato pie. Miles cried out once in his sleep and then went quiet. Outside, Houston hummed along like it always does, indifferent and enormous and full of people building their lives in the dark. 3 weeks after that meeting, my assistant forwarded me a meeting request. From Dorian Voss, personal, not business. I stared at it for a long time. I asked Imani what she thought. "You don't owe him anything," she said, "but if you want to hear it, hear it. Closure is for you, not for him." I accepted the meeting. We met at a coffee shop in Rice Village on a Wednesday afternoon. I brought nothing. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with an untouched coffee in front of him, and he looked older somehow. Not in a bad way, just more gravity in his face, like something had been pressing on him. I sat down. I ordered a tea. He talked for a long time. He said he had been doing therapy, had been doing it for about a year, that he had started to understand patterns in himself that he hadn't been willing to see before, that he'd been raised by a mother who valued status and performance over substance, and that he'd internalized a way of evaluating people, including partners, by how they reflected on him rather than who they actually were. "When your career started accelerating and mine plateaued," he said, "I felt it. I felt smaller. And instead of dealing with that, I looked for the exit." "You emailed me the exit," I said. He winced. "I know," he said. "I've thought about that email more than you probably believe I have. I was a coward. I knew if I called you or sat across from you, I would have to see what I was doing, and I didn't want to see it." I wrapped my hands around my teacup. "What do you want from this conversation, Dorian?" He was quiet for a moment. "I don't think I want anything," he said slowly. "I think I just needed to say, I was wrong about you, about who you were. I looked at you and I don't know what I saw. Something that I thought I had outgrown, something smaller than what I needed." He paused. "You were never any of those things." I looked at him for a long time. "No," I said. A pause. "How is Miles?" he asked. "He's wonderful," I said. "He deserves a father who shows up for him, not because I'm asking you to or because a lawyer says you have to, but because you want to. If that ever becomes true for you, you know where to find me." I finished my tea. I stood up. "Take care of yourself, Dorian." And I walked out into the afternoon, into the noise and heat of Houston, and I felt not triumphant, not sad. I felt like a person who had finally set down something very heavy and then stood up straight. I have to tell you about Rosalind Voss, because her chapter in this story has its own particular shape. About 6 months after that coffee shop meeting, I received a handwritten letter. Handwritten, on cream stationery with a small embossed R at the top. It was from Rosalind. 4 paragraphs. She wrote that she had watched her son's marriage unravel, watched Miles grow up largely without a father present, watched her own pride and narrow-mindedness play a part in choices that had consequences she hadn't fully reckoned. She wrote that she had told Dorian, in those early days, that I wasn't right for him, that I was too focused on my work, too independent, not the kind of woman who would put a family first. She wrote, I was describing my own fears as your flaws. That was wrong of me, and I have had to sit with that. She did not ask for anything. She did not close with a warm invitation. She just wrote what she wrote and signed it Rosalind. I read it twice. Then I wrote back. I wrote, Thank you for your letter. It took something real to write it. I hope you know Miles. He has Claudette Marbury's stubbornness and the most spectacular laugh I've ever heard. He should know all of his family, if they want to know him. That door is open. I mailed it on a Tuesday. 2 Saturdays later, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Celine, said Rosalind Voss, and her voice was different from how I'd always heard it, smaller, less armored. I was wondering if I could visit Miles sometime, if that would be appropriate. I looked at Miles, who was at that moment standing in the living room wearing only a diaper and a fireman's hat, narrating something to himself in a language only he understood. Saturday mornings are usually good, I said. I am 33 years old as I tell you this story. My net worth cleared $6 million last month. FreightPath is now integrated into Meridian's national network. I lead a team of 41 people. I fly to Atlanta quarterly and to our Phoenix hub twice a year. Constance Okware is the best boss I've ever had, and she has told me, privately, that she sees me running a division within 3 years. I bought a house, not the one in Katy, a different house. My house, in a neighborhood in Houston with big live oak trees and a neighbor who brings me tamales at Christmas. I have a home office with Miles's art on every available surface. I have a backyard with a little plastic slide that Miles treats like it's the most important piece of infrastructure in the world. My mother comes over every Sunday. She and Miles have a whole routine that involves him helping her make cornbread, which mostly means pouring flour on the counter and looking innocent. Petra got married last year to a nurse named Ambrose who thinks she hung the moon, which she absolutely did. I was her maid of honor. I cried through the entire vow reading. Payback is real. Imani Osei is my business partner in a small startup we're quietly building on the side, a logistics consulting platform for small and mid-sized carriers that don't have access to enterprise-level software. We've been working on it for 8 months. Wallace Briggs has already expressed interest in leading a seed round. Dr. Fong is still my therapist. We meet every 3 weeks. I am, she tells me, doing genuinely well. Dorian has started showing up for Miles, slowly, imperfectly, with the careful deliberateness of a man who knows he already missed too much and is trying not to miss more. He takes Miles on Saturday mornings sometimes, to the park, to the Children's Museum. Miles calls him Dada in a casual, offhand way, the way children accept people on whatever terms are available without making a production of it. I don't know what Dorian and Britta's relationship looks like now. I don't need to know. I know what mine looks like. I have been asked by Petra, by Imani, by people who know pieces of this story, whether what happened to me was revenge. I've thought about it a lot, and my answer is, not exactly. Or maybe more than that. Real revenge, I think, is when you spend your energy trying to make someone suffer, when you organize your life around their punishment, when you wake up every morning thinking about how to make them hurt the way they hurt you. I never did that. What I did was simpler and harder. I refused to be broken. I went back to work the morning after I found that email sitting in my inbox. I built Freight Path through a pregnancy and a divorce, and a newborn and a rebuilding. I made my investments. I showed up for my son. I went to therapy. I answered Rosalind's letter. I walked into that conference room and did my job. And the universe, in its own ridiculous, improbable way, put Dorian Voss across a conference table from me eventually, not so I could win, but so I could stand there, whole and clear and unbroken, and let the truth of what I had built speak for itself. That's the revenge, not the suffering of another person, the evidence of your own life. Here is what I want you to carry with you from this story. When someone shows you who they are, especially in the way they exit your life, believe them, let them go, and then get very, very quiet and get to work. You don't build a great life by spending your energy on people who've already walked out the door. You build it by turning toward the life in front of you and saying, okay, let's go. The email that was supposed to break me became the first document of my second chapter. I am grateful for it, not for what it said, for what I did with it. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. We tell stories like this every single week, and I want to hear from you in the comments. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city, your town, your country. Let me see the whole map light up. And if you ever had a moment where someone underestimated you and lived to regret it, tell me below. Your story deserves to be told too. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it right now. You never know who's sitting in a parking lot somewhere, holding their phone, trying to breathe. I'll see you in the next one.